Hi, everyone. Welcome. We can see folks logging in right now. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you all for being here with us today. All right. All right. It looks like more and more of you are finding your way into the webinar, so that's fantastic. We will get started in about 2 minutes. And we've got our first question already about whether this will be recorded, and the answer is yes, it will. And the recording will be available up on our webinar website in a couple of days. So if you have a meeting in conflict or you want to go back and review any of this content, this will be recorded and available to you. And if you are joining as a participant, we've had another question. Yes, you will be automatically on mute, so you don't have to worry about your background noise. When we get ready for Q&A, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will ask you to click on that and be able to type in your questions, and then we'll be able to answer those when we get to that part of the webinar. So we are ready to get started. Thank you all for being here. And Brian, thank you so much for being with us. We are thrilled to have Brian join us today. Brian Williams is a partner with the Brevet Group, a leading sales effectiveness firm. He has experience as a sales leader, consultant, trainer, and researcher, and he combines practical advice with academic insight to help companies grow. He has a PhD in strategic selling, so he brings a science-based approach to modern sales, and his research has been featured in the Harvard Business Review and other outlets as well. So with 25 years career in sales, Brian has worked in fast growth startups, mid-market players, and large national sales teams, and we very much appreciate his time today. So Brian, I will hand this over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for everyone that has joined us this afternoon. I know these are interesting times, right? And I know sometimes just getting on these sorts of webinars, trying to hear what other folks are thinking, share ideas, that's a large part of our sort of process to manage and navigate these uncertain times. And what interesting times we have. And we think about really in a short period of time, the amount of disruption, the amount of change that we've been having to navigate through. I love this quote. This is a leading venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. And you think about this, this is someone who is in the middle of the tech scene, something that really is by default fast changing, and the observation that many of these startups, many of the folks even in that environment, it's felt like 5 years of change in just in a matter of short weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so into this process. So it's an interesting time. And I think what's interesting is to see what choices we're making in terms of how we're responding. I like this metaphor because I think many of us are doing maybe one of these scenarios. If we think about our reaction to the stress, to the uncertainty, to the new modern environment we're in, some of us are kind of like that image there on the left. We're kind of cowering, we're hiding in the back of the closet. We're hoping that this thing will soon go away. We'll be back to quote unquote normal times. I'm not sure that's right. Or some of us may be kind of responding there like the photo on the right. We're becoming very OCD. We're starting to hyper organize. Maybe we're organizing our closet in sort of this super highly organized way. Okay, well, that's maybe a little bit more productive response, but still, I'm not sure that that is the right thing we need to be doing as we think about leading our sales teams, having our salespeople be most effective as they engage our customers and our partners out in the marketplace. So not hiding in the back and not maybe focusing on silly things like over organizing our closet. What are we going to do? And I think one of the things we want to be talking about in our webinar today, and a theme that I think will go through our conversation, is the idea of how do we reframe our thinking? How do we think about this, certainly as an uncertain time, but what are the opportunities that are emerging right now for us as we lead our sales teams, as we interact with our customers? And in some respects, it's interesting to think about what happens in a forest fire. You know, a forest fire is certainly a very dramatic event, comes up oftentimes very suddenly. It's a massively destructive event. We see there in the center, what happens? I mean, lots of things get destroyed, lots of vegetation, but there's often very good things that come out of a forest fire. In some respects, the Forest Service, as many of you know, often intentionally set fires because that's the healthy thing to do to a forest. It helps to clear out a lot of the underbrush. It starts to bring light into the dense forest floor. It opens up the environment for new growth, for new and new life to emerge. And in some respects, that's an interesting lens for us as we think about the environment we're in. We're certainly in a scary time. And I think as we even see the news over the last few days and weeks, I'm not sure there's necessarily a clear light at the end of this tunnel. So are we going to be hiding in the back of the closet? Are we going to be wasting our time, maybe over organizing and being OCD about our closet? Or again, are we going to use this and embrace this as an opportunity to innovate, to think about our sales organization differently, to think about how we can really elevate the effectiveness of our teams and our interactions with our customers? And that's what I want to focus on in our time today, is let's build a plan together. How can we shift our mindset from fear and uncertainty to innovation and opportunity? And we're going to talk about three very specific things where we believe, as we interact with a number of distribution companies, as well as others in other sectors, what are some themes that start to differentiate the highest performers, the folks that seem to be setting themselves up for success, depending on where we're going in this new environment? And there are really sort of three key messages that we'll cover today. One is, this is an opportunity for us to reevaluate how are we adding value, not only in the products and the services and the solutions that we provide. How are we redefining the definition of value even beyond price? This is the time for us to really do that, to almost have a reset in our relationships and think about what is valuable and how we can differentiate ourselves, even in the sales process in this environment. We're also going to be talking about how are we adapting some of our very specific selling strategies as we interact with customers and buyers and other decision makers, and what can we be doing in this new environment to navigate what are very challenging decision processes. Getting to yes, getting contracts closed, that's certainly very, very difficult in this environment. So what are some things that we need to be on the lookout for, and things that we can be doing to optimize those customer conversations and those deals? And lastly, what's that opportunity for us to optimize our overall sales system? Again, as we think about us as individual salespeople, or maybe we're in a position of leading sales teams, what can we be doing to optimize our broader approach to the sales system in our organization? And it really starts on this first point. Again, what is value? And what are buyers, what are decision makers, what are they valuing right now in this moment? And our point is, it's a little different than it may have looked 6, 8, 9 weeks ago. What are we seeing when we talk to buyers, when we do our own research, when we look at our other clients, some of your companies, some of your competitors? What are we hearing in terms of what buyers are valuing? What is really their state of mind? Massive changes in how they're thinking about decisions, purchase decisions, how they're thinking about engaging you guys in terms of the products and services you provide. Clearly, high levels of stress, a strong focus on cash preservation. the need to really level up the conversation where you may have had the ability to get a sign off or some kind of a decision at a lower level in the organization. Those approvals are getting moved up higher and higher. Natural risk aversion is always strong, but in this environment, the fear of making the wrong purchase decision is even greater. Obviously, the limitations on us being able in a lockdown, stay-at-home situation to be able to have face-to-face conversations, those are pretty daunting challenges. I mean, sales is probably the most challenging job we have in the modern business world today. You overlay some of these challenges, that's kind of daunting. But let's talk about the positives. Back to this metaphor. We can be fearful, or we can think about this as opportunities. So on the positive side of the ledger, I think this creates opportunities for us. Your buyers, they need guidance. They are facing very, very complex decisions. This now opens them up to hear from you, to really be open to some new ideas, to maybe revisit some of the decisions and some of the processes that they've been trying to follow through in terms of even deals or projects or other initiatives. Status quo is under attack. One of the things that I know you know as sales professionals is that your biggest competitor really is just to do nothing or just to stay with the status quo. Well, we're in an environment now where status quo is not acceptable, right? We're going to have to do some things differently in this new environment. So again, that opens up the opportunity to have different kinds of conversations. How do we really use that? And obviously, certainly an urgency around problems and issues, the need and an opportunity for our folks to actually, our buyers, to be more accessible, which is interesting. When we look at some of our clients that do a lot of outbound calling, as an example, traditionally, some of the metrics we look at is how many dials and how many connects might a salesperson have over the course of an hour. Well, those number of connects are actually getting shorter, smaller numbers, but the length of these calls are actually longer, which is interesting. Even in a cold call situation, I think buyers are more open, they're more accessible, they're not traveling, the commute times are down. So again, these are opportunities for us to rethink how we're adding value. And I think we need to acknowledge that there's no one size fits all, that we're in a marketplace where our buyers, our decision makers, they're all in slightly different places depending on what they're experiencing. This is an interesting chart from an investment banking firm to really start to think about all the different sectors and their levels of exposure to what's going on. High exposure, moderate, low. Some companies are obviously, they're thriving in this environment. So we've got to be thoughtful. This is going to take a little bit more intentionality on the part of our sales reps to be more savvy as they engage their buyers and really think through what's going on. And again, what are ways that we can add value, that we can differentiate? And the key here to us is we need to think about how do we soften this focus around the hard sales pitch? I think as times get more challenging and our teams are really struggling to hit their quota, there is an urgency to maybe push harder and harder and harder. And I think what we're seeing as we hear the research and we hear the feedback from buyers is, again, this definition of value is really being related to some different things. And it's not so much about the sales pitch, the hard sales pitch, but it's some of these, let's call it softer elements. How can we, as we think about the folks that we interact with in the market on a day-to-day basis, how are we adding value in things like sharing information, helping decision makers really understand what other companies and how they're navigating through some of these decisions? Even the ability to offer some support. Folks are under stress. There's a lot of layoffs happening. You guys know that. You see these unemployment numbers. These are very real stresses your buyers and decision makers are facing. How can we offer connections with them? How can we really lead with a sense of empathy and understanding and help folks really, in a personal level, navigate some of these very, very complex decisions? When we're asking people to sign a contract with us around a product or a service, we have to know that that's a number of many different decisions that they're facing at any one time. How does that decision impact them personally? How does that maybe put them at risk? How are we asking them to stick their neck out on a very, very hard decision? So how are we thinking about value and what we can give to people differently? And a lot of it is simple things that we are not doing enough of. I know your teams, many of them are doing over here on the left-hand side. We'll call it kind of the check-ins. A lot of check-in calls happening. That's good. Let's not do those. But at the same time, think about all those ways that we can add value in terms of sharing what we're seeing, giving advice around other vendors or other services. We get a lot of calls from clients right now saying, hey, you guys are doing a lot of virtual meetings. What virtual meeting software are you using? What can you recommend around that? Or, hey, we're struggling with this labor issue. What are you guys doing with your teams in a virtual environment, et cetera? So you've got a lot of just practical advices. People are hungry for that. So be a connector in that regard. Help provide information. And then over on the other end of the spectrum, which is much stronger than just a check-in, is something kind of like this. How many of you guys in your markets are using Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams or some other technology to actually facilitate some gatherings of your buyers and customers? Just get them together virtually. You can do that in a social setting. We've all done sort of the virtual cocktail hour, and that's fun. But you can use that time to actually share information. Hey, we know this is an issue in this sector. This is what folks are doing and struggling with that. Let's try to exchange some ideas. You guys can be the facilitators around that. And again, that's an opportunity to add massive amounts of value and put a lot of goodwill in the bank with your relationships. What does value not look like, guys? Is this. It's a bit of an eye chart, but the point here is this is a company that's tracking the email outbound marketing and sales campaigns related to COVID since really sort of the start of this whole process. I mean, look at the tens of thousands of email campaigns that we have all seen, even in our own personal inboxes, are just blowing up. Like, stay connected to people, but add value and be relevant. A bunch of generic email blast out to your customers, that's not value. You're just contributing to the noise. So don't do that. Again, be a little bit more thoughtful in ways that you can be tailored, be real, provide real information, et cetera. This also requires us to not be tone deaf. I'm seeing sales folks, again, I appreciate their assertiveness and their aggressiveness, but you know what it comes across to a lot of your buyers is just a lot of tone deafness. I mean, here's Doritos here on the one side, you know, they're running little social media campaigns about social distancing and how many bags of Doritos does 6 feet look like, et cetera. Okay, that's kind of humorous perhaps, but could be offensive to some. Look in the middle there. This is David Geffen. I don't know him. I'm sure he's a really awesome, nice guy, but he's a big Hollywood producer. He's on his social media feed, and he's saying, "Hey, you know, I'm social distancing. I'm trying to avoid the virus. And I'm doing that on my look at this massive yacht. I'm watching the sunset." That's not really appropriate right now. I mean, what's the version that your teams are doing that look kind of tone deaf like that? Well, I can tell you a lot of them are doing over here on the right. They're just sending inundate email. Hey, did you get my email? Hey, I sent you an email yesterday. I haven't followed up. Again, how do we find that right balance of being assertive in this environment, but not contributing to the noise and the levels of stress that your buyers are already struggling with? Again, let's be careful of that. What this is about is almost an acknowledgement that you may be in a situation where your just deals are not going to be closing in this environment. A lot of stress, a lot of tension over commitment. That's real. So let's not try to ignore that the ability to close new projects, new deals right now may be very, very tough. So part of this is, what's our definition of success? What are we doing with our relationships in this new definition of value to put money in the bank, relationship capital that we know down the road will pay off? These intangible contracts, there's a lot of psychology around that, guys, and you understand that. When you do good things for people in need, they're going to remember that. And again, they may not be able to sign a contract right now or make a big purchase decision in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But we've got to live with a sense of optimism that when we do the right things for our customers right now, it is going to pay off, putting that money in the relationship bank. So let's talk about our second point, which is really, what are we doing to adapt our specific selling strategies? Meaning, we're in specific deals, specific opportunities. What are we going to do differently? How can we be much more effective? How can we coach our reps, our sellers, to be more successful in what is, again, a very, very challenging sales environment. One of the things we're going to talk about now are 4 very specific decision modes, we're going to call it, things that we're seeing from customers. Why are these deals not closing? What can we go do about it? What are we seeing in terms of the buyer's reaction to, again, sign contracts, get sign off, move forward with big projects, et cetera? And there really are kind of 4 real common modes that we're seeing across many, many markets, even markets that are starting to open up. We're starting to see some of these modes still be very, very prevalent. So let's talk through each of these kind of buyer reactions to our ask to commit, and then what are we going to do about that? How can we be realistic about these situations and hopefully use them to push things forward? Let's start with this ready, fire, in. This is something that we're seeing in many, many situations. This is a very, very natural reaction to stress. It's this concept of, hey, I just want to do something. I got to commit to something. I'm under pressure from my boss. I got to do some kind of show some value. So what does that look like to our sellers? Is maybe there's not a lot of patience for us to get into the detail. Maybe we're used to really sitting down with a design person or thinking about a new initiative, a new project, helping them review a bunch of alternatives, a bunch of options. You may actually see them going forward with things, the wrong product, the wrong implementation, the wrong solution configuration. You may be seeing that. Maybe they're kind of volatile and almost emotional about just moving forward. Maybe they're feeling a lot of pressure to just show value. We see that as a big sort of reaction we're seeing in the marketplace. But here's the caution I want to issue to you: is a bit of kind of a metaphor of here's Spider-Man trying to stop the speeding train. Guys, this is when we do not necessarily want to be Spider-Man. If you're encountering buyers that are eager to move forward with things, even if they are the wrong thing, in your view, the wrong solution, don't do what all of us, most of us, tend to have a natural reaction to do, which is, I'm here to help you make the right choice. I know you're looking at XYZ configuration and you need to do it in an ABC solution. You're not thinking about this properly. Oftentimes, we're, as good consultative salespeople, we want to do that. And what does that look like to your buyer? You're just stopping me. Don't do that. That's not necessarily the right selling move in today's environment. The alternative is, let's line up to that. Let's be really embracing that tone and that sense of urgency, that language. Let's try to really understand what they're driving toward and how do we reframe what we're talking about so it lines up with what they perceive to be their priority. Because oftentimes, if we're going to challenge them or really push back on them, or again, feel like we're adding value by helping them understand some of these issues, again, the perception of that is not very positive. It looks like you're actually hurting them or making life more difficult. So be thoughtful about how you're approaching those kinds of situations. Trying to make your customer feel stupid right now or trying to push back on things is probably not the right strategy. So identify what is that driving motivation, that driving initiative, and how do we, again, wrap our solution around that so that we can try to move these deals forward. The second big mode is just flat out deferral. I think this is the number one thing you're probably seeing. I mean, I can't tell you the kinds of conversations, even in our own business, this language around, hey, I like you guys. I love this solution. Appreciate this demo. Looks good. But we just got to revisit this later. I can't deal with this right now. It's not a priority. You can't get commitment, and you can't even get an understanding of maybe how budgets are being reallocated to other priorities, et cetera. Very, very clear response right now. Here's how we got to adapt our approach. We, again, need to be very, very transparent in our conversations with our customers. We need to be talking about other ways that we can stay engaged and be relevant. So maybe the big solution that we originally talked to them about, maybe that's just not possible right now. So that's fine. How do we start to chunk down our opportunity, start to reframe that? And again, the thing that we're going to talk more and more about this idea of what is that near-term impact of whatever we're talking about? How do we start to translate that in terms that show like it has relevance today? And one of the things that we at a minimum want to do, even if we can't close a deal, you've invested time in these opportunities, you've gotten to understand their issues, you might have a great solution, great set of products lined up to help them. What we have to do is we can't abandon this, right? Let's work together with the buyer to at least get a commitment for some kind of a future action. And one of the things I see a lot of sellers do that's just bad selling is you do a lot of this, okay, yeah, let's revisit that in June, let's revisit that in July. Let's use this as an opportunity while we're in the conversation, you're on the phone or you're on the Zoom call with them, open up your calendar. You have it right there on your desktop. Open up your calendar, let's get a date booked and a commitment to have that conversation in whatever date in the future that is. So don't let that be all fuzzy and vague at the end of the conversation, which is one of the things we see oftentimes in that process. So one of the things we want to avoid, every one of these has a bit of a watch out. And the watch out on this one is oftentimes when we get deals stalled out, we get frustrated. What do? Is we want to do the workaround. We might have a relationship with a more senior person in that organization, and we want to maybe put a little leverage or force on that decision, and we kind of go above their head. Don't do that. That's something, again, people are feeling very vulnerable. Again, unemployment rates are very, very high. People are stressed out. Sales results at these companies are being highly impacted. So don't do things that make your buyer feel more threatened. And again, we might do that in a more normal time, use a little bit of leverage. That's just not appropriate in this environment. We've got to have some patience, again, and a confidence that this stuff is going to pay off in the good things we're doing now down the road. A third model that we're seeing mode that was very, very common, guys, and we're seeing this in our own business time and time again, is we'll call it the analysis paralysis. You're in conversations, you've had multiple calls. Again, maybe they've seen demos, you've been out to the site, maybe we've even put different products and services into use, maybe some free trials, et cetera, but you just can't get the commitment. It's like they just continue to bring up more and more things that are just slowing down the momentum of the deal, moving the goalpost, if you will. A lot of additional requests. What does that sound like? Hey, I want to see more references, or hey, can you give me more spec information on this? Hey, I need more information about how this is going to fit into my project plan, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, I need you to meet one other person that will likely have a point of view on that. Again, what does this do? It's just stalling. It's almost like they're over-analyzing, overthinking these commitments. And this is a very, very common reaction to stress and making decisions in this uncertain time. So what do we got to do? How do we got to coach our salespeople to deal with this? Is a very intentional focus on how can we establish some level of urgency and commitment in this process. And again, maybe it is about us carving up this commitment into some baby steps. How do we simplify the choices? One of the things that we do is folks might be looking for more and more alternatives. They're asking for more recommendations in terms of products, and oftentimes we provide that. But what are we really doing in those situations is we're just adding to the confusion and the stress, because we're just giving them more and more choices and more alternatives to talk through and to analyze. So one of the things we want to be doing in this environment is simplifying the decision-making process for our buyers. And oftentimes it comes down to us being very, very frank and direct about what are the risks of them not making a decision. Are there price implications if they don't make a decision? Are there supply inventory concerns that if they don't make a decision now, they may be down the road? We're working with a lot of electrical distributors right now that, hey, maybe inventory levels are fine now, but if you see what's happening on a global basis, given the pandemic, what do the supply chains look like in 3 months or 6 months? We may be in a situation where getting these various components may be at risk, and buyers need to understand those risks. So having very transparent and open discussions around those risks around delaying or doing nothing, we need to do that. The call out here in this mode there at the bottom is one of the things we need to coach our teams around to avoid is just continuing to play the game. I mean, this is I think a natural customer service orientation that our sellers have, which on the one hand is admirable and it's really solid. We want to be responsive to all these additional request after request. But when we do that, we're kind of continuing to play the game. So what are we going to do to kind of call the question around that? How do we, again, have a very frank but appropriately, not be tone deaf, but have an appropriate conversation with our buyers? Say, look, guys, appreciate the time, want to be helpful, but we've got to make a decision, or we've got to figure out a way to make some commitment to move forward. So trying to find that right balance is really key. This last mode we're seeing, which it's a little bit of a red flag in and of itself. When we're in deals and we see this kind of all systems go kind of mentality, and the world is fundamentally different than it was, again, 8 or 10 weeks ago. But when you've got buyers, particularly large commitments, large purchase deals, and they're telling you, hey, it's all business as usual. Hey, we're moving forward with this big project, this big renovation, this big new building, new initiative. I think you've got to really be concerned. And again, as you're coaching your salespeople and as you're an individual salesperson, this is a huge red flag. If you're seeing this, the natural human reaction is to say, oh man, this is awesome. I'm going to get this thing closed. We often say that salespeople have happy ears. We want to listen and be tuned into all the good news. But I think in this uncertain and sort of uncharted territory we're operating in, when we see this is a massive point of concern. You guys need to be highly skeptical when you see this. There's a situation maybe that's happening in the background that you're not aware of, or maybe your buyer is not aware of. The decision maker you're working with may be just a little naive about this. They may not be very savvy as they're trying to navigate some of this decision. You've seen these deals before. You know that there's probably going to be more and more people that need to sign off on this, that there's a lot of competing interests. Again, people are focused on cash preservation. So have that level of skepticism. Think to yourself, okay, I'm hearing that, but what else am I going to be doing to have other points of connection into this? How do I validate this information through others, other departments, et cetera? Again, skepticism is important when you see that. Why is this important? This is just a series of data that you guys have seen, and you're feeling that. I mean, this is a survey of chief financial officers. Again, sort of what are they doing in response to this environment? They're doing cost containment. They're canceling projects. They're deferring projects. They're changing the way that they're making investments in some of their financial strategies and financial plans. Again, this has a massive impact in the people we're dealing with, and their approvals and their ability to get things signed off on. So how do we have a level of just understanding of the reality of the environment we're in? Getting deals closed, given all these financial pressures and the need to cut cost, is increasingly challenging. But we know buying decisions are being made. And I like this image here. Think about this as a bit of a metaphor. We think we have this massive dam that's blocking our guys from getting deals closed, but we know some deals are getting through the dam. They are starting to break through on some of these pressures and stresses. And what's the theme there? What is getting through the dam? Very simply, when our salespeople are able to talk about the financial and business impact of the purchase decision. It's not about the spec. It's not about the features and the speeds and the feeds and all of that great product information that our reps may know and have mastered, and we have a great set of products in our bag. But we're in a situation and we don't have the ability to click a little bit higher and talk to our buyers about what is the financial and business impact of this product or service. If we can't make that connection, the buyer is likely not making that connection. So we've got to be thinking about ourselves in every deal. What are we doing to make that connection, make it very, very direct in terms of, hey, this is a great product, but let me talk about how that has an impact on your business, how that's going to have an impact on your financial, near-term financial return. So you've got to be listening for that. You've got to be proactively communicating that. Like, what's the return on this? This is an investment of X, Y, and Z. What's the impact in the near term? What cost savings am I going to achieve? translate the benefits of your product into those kinds of business terms, financial terms. That's what we've got to do. We've got to be coaching our teams to be able to do that, because that is the massive concern. You guys know that, and you see that day to day in the customer interactions you're having. So don't fall into the trap related to this. What are some of the traps? Some of the traps is that we're not overly confident. We're not ready for those responses. Or, hey, we're not hearing questions about that. So we think, oh, well, life is good. We're just going to just keep on doing our thing. No, again, that's a red flag. If you're not hearing these questions about what's the return on these investments, what's the business impact, you've got to get on that, or we're not proactively communicating that, or we ourselves don't do that. So again, that's where you've got to work with your equipment partners, your solution partners, and others to think about translating that into some business language, because you may be talking to a decision maker that is all about the use, the ease of use, and other sorts of features, but there are going to be CFOs and other financial brains that are going to have to be involved and will be involved in this decision in this environment. So let's talk about this final point in terms of your sales system as we wrap this up. One is we obviously are working our pipeline. Our pipeline shapes are looking very, very different in this new environment. What do we know for sure? The overall volume of leads is lower. The speed, the velocity of the deals flowing through these, our pipelines are different. The sizes of our deals are different. The ability to kind of upsell, our win rates are different. You as a leader and you as an individual salesperson right now need to be recalculating and understanding what the new reality of your pipeline math is. And just thinking through the impacts of what some of these small changes are having, and what that could mean to your revenue this year. As we think about a situation where traditionally we may be closing 50% of our leads, maybe have turned into opportunities, maybe we're got a 25% win rate on our deals, maybe our average deal size is $100,000, 20 deals at $100,000, that's a $2 million target. Guess what? Deals, our conversions, our opportunities are lower, our win rates are much, much lower, our deal sizes are lower. All these things we're talked about in terms of risk and stresses over committing to big projects. So these can have massive impacts on your revenue. The distributors and other companies we're dealing with are facing pretty significant revenue shortfalls this year. So let's be very, very realistic about what our math looks like. Let's not be naive. And then what are we going to do about that? And a lot of it has to do with what are we doing with the time decisions? Folks are at home. The day feels different. Time fundamentally feels different. What can we control? Warren Buffett would remind us, I can buy anything I want, but I can't buy time. Time's about the only thing that we can likely control in this environment. We have to have a clear view of what time looks like. If we think about our selling time in a traditional world, a lot of things can fill our week, but there's a lot of things that are going away. Being out in the market, doing the travel, doing a lot of events, going to trade shows, et cetera, those things are not in the calendar right now. But we've got a lot of internal meetings oftentimes. We're doing a lot of just distractions at home as we're all having to turn into teachers with our kids, et cetera. So we need to have a frank understanding of our time and think about what are we doing with our time? How are we allocating our time to be out in the market and to be very intentional? Because I'd say our leads, our top of the funnel opportunities are at risk. Things that we would normally be networking, being out at events, trade shows, et cetera, we're not able to do that. So those new leads at the top of the funnel are at risk. How can we be more visible out in the market? How can we continue to have those connections as we talked about earlier? We've got to be more intentional. Got to embrace some of this weird social media stuff that is not going to go away. How can we just be present and be visible in this new environment? And again, this idea of use this time to bring folks together in a virtual way, some virtual networking. So again, lots of opportunities, but I think a very critical view around our time and our pipeline. So guys, I think the point I want to end on is this is an opportunity for us. Disruption, which we're in the middle of, it can accelerate innovation. It can help us rethink and maybe tune up the sales engine of our companies. I love some of these examples. These are companies that were really born in the moment of deep market disruption, whether it's depressions or recessions, et cetera. Companies that really became the successful organizations they are in times of distress. I think that's our opportunity. that's our chance as a distributor in our own world. What are we going to do to step up? Because these changes are likely not going to be temporary. The bar and the expectations of our buyers and our customers are not going to get lower. In fact, they're going to just continue to get higher. The scrutiny over external spend and projects, new projects, that is going to continue to rise. So again, how can we add value? So what we want to do is to help your teams do that. We've prepped a little bit of a personal checklist, and we want to make that available for you guys for free to think through your own teams, maybe your own personal time. So there's an email address there at the bottom, info@thebrevittgroup.com. Send you a quick copy of that. Summarizes a lot of the key points of our session today, but I think a reminder, we have to be very focused and very intentional on what we're doing in this new environment to thrive. This is our opportunity to step up and our opportunity to explore some new innovative things. So Kelly, I know there may be some questions or some comments. Happy to use our time to help answer some of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. So the first question is, we're seeing a lot of analysis paralysis, more hoops to jump through, like you said. How do we get our teams to handle this?
Yeah, again, I think of those four modes. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of deferrals, but that analysis paralysis, it's very human nature. I was telling someone the other day, I've been trying to make a personal purchase decision. We're all at home. We're all doing these Zoom meetings. I'd like to get a big monitor, right, for my computer. I can't tell you how much time I have spent on the web. I don't know anything about computer monitors, trying to figure out what's the right computer monitor. And you go to one website, here's the best list, here's another website, and what you find yourself is 2 or 3 weeks later, you're not making a purchase decision, or your buyers are in the same way. This analysis paralysis. One of the things that I would really recommend your teams do is back to this having very frank, direct conversation, is ultimately you got to call the question at some point. So a lot of times we have to deliver kind of a get real message. That's what we call it. What does that sound like? It sounds like saying, hey, Mr. Buyer, we've had tons of conversations. I'm doing everything I can to provide you all this extra information you're looking for. But I got to tell you, I'm not sure this is really the issue right now. Maybe this is not the right time for us to make this decision. I think this is still the right thing for you to do. What's a good time for us to revisit this decision? And really share with them, just a very direct message about this is important, but let's commit to revisiting this in the future, and let's just really kind of frank conversation around that. So it is what it is, but like having a commitment to go revisit that in 30 days, 60 days, et cetera, being real about that dialogue is key.
Okay, great. Next question. What is the biggest rock that sales reps need to deal with right now? Where is the biggest pain point?
I think the biggest thing that I am seeing time and time again is this stress. I think our sellers, they know they've got to get out there. They've got to hit their number. Obviously, their compensation plans are tied to their own individual performance. So I think how do we help our folks take a deep breath in this environment? And the more pressure they're feeling, they're communicating that pressure to buyers. And again, in an environment where we're trying to be a voice of calm, a voice of adding value in all those ways we talked about, when we're putting more stress and we're sending more and more emails to people, again, we've got to find that right balance of being assertive and aggressive, but at the same time, knowing where that line is and realizing, hey, am I really adding value here? So I think the biggest rock from the reps are, how can you take a deep breath, maybe avoid some of the natural inclination that you have to be pounding your prospects, but take a deep breath and be empathetic, make those commitments to the relationship and have confidence that down the road that those things will pay off.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. How aggressive should you be with special rates and discounts during this time based on urgency?
Yeah, that's probably an individual decision, distributor. The reality is, we're working with companies, revenue is down. We're looking at 30, 40% decreases in revenue. So as you look at the margins of your product lines, the ability to be getting something closed to have some level of cash flow, I mean, you've got to be prepared to make those kinds of decisions. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing to try and do that. But again, it's kind of on a case by case basis. One of the things I think is a key part of that strategy, though, right now is let's be transparent with our buyer around that. I think being able to say, look, we're taking a hit for you. We're making an investment in this relationship. I want you to understand this is important. We're all going through this together. But at the same time, I want you to know we're going to turn around. Things are going to get better. You've got to believe that in the future. And I'm going to remember that. And we're going to, you may do it in a joking way, but I think acknowledge when you're taking a hit, try to put that money in the bank again for the future in terms of sort of a commitment to continue the relationship and kind of strengthen that partnership.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. This might be a little tough. I love that we're in Zoom to answer this question. Do you have any top tips for remote Salesforce management?
That is really, really hard. It's two things, right? You're trying to get your reps to engage your buyers in a remote mode because they're not going on site, they're not doing the visits. And then you're managing these teams. I think you've got to have a very strong cadence. Where we're seeing the breakdown is where we don't have systematic structures that says, hey, every Monday I'm doing a good touch base call, or every Friday I'm bringing the team together in a group call. When I don't have a structure like that, my default is just to constantly inundate my teams with a lot of check-ins and whatever. And again, you're doing the things that we're telling our reps not to do to our buyers, which is you're adding a lot of stress to their lives, blowing up their phone, a lot of one-off unscheduled meetings, et cetera. So I think the most important thing is lay a foundation with your teams and say, hey, I'm going to be asking for this information on a regular basis. I want to do a one-on-one with you, 15 minutes on Monday. Let's look at your week. Let's look at your pipeline. Hey, on Friday afternoons, we're going to get together as a team. We're going to be sharing some best practices, et cetera, et cetera. But that standard structure, people are hungry for structure and chaos right now. So you as a leader, I think, have got to do that. And it's even more important when you can't see your teams face to face.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, we have time for one more question.
Awesome.
My sales results are actually holding steady through April. Should I adjust revenue forecast moving forward?
Yeah, I think this fits in the category of that. Hey, when you have a lot of customers that are saying, "Yeah, we're going to close that deal. Life is good. All signs are green." I think you had to have some skepticism about that. I think it feels good. It's an interesting environment, right? You turn on the news, you see certain markets that are opening up. You see people out on beaches, and certainly we want to embrace that, and we don't want to be negative Nelly around a lot of this stuff. But I think we're in for a lot of up and downs, and we don't know what this is going to look like. So we might have a really strong, so congratulations having that strong through April, and hopefully you can continue to stay steady. But we don't know. A lot of times these decisions, these dollars, these budget items, those decisions are being made right now that we may not feel the effect of until August or September. So I think have a level of skepticism, be very, very conservative and cautious around that. And I think you got to be transparent with your teams around that in terms of the expectations with them and their own individual activity.
Awesome. All right, perfect timing. Brian, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We've gotten some comments saying this is right. These are great points. We need to focus on strengthening relationships. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of your insight with us. Everyone, thank you so much for attending. Our NAAD COVID-19 resources page at naad.org/resources is where you can come to find webinars like this and the resources, and we'll have the recording posted in a couple of days. So thank you all for being here. Brian, thank you so much.
Awesome. Appreciate it.